This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Like I said before, my name is Glen Evans. I'm with Columbia Hydronics, and we're going to talk about a sustainable lifestyle. And what we're going to go into is the fact that this career, being in HVAC, has afforded me the ability to go to a lot of different places and do a lot of different things. And a lot of people don't understand that about our field. And in doing that, this is a trip to Seoul, Korea, Iceland, off to Hawaii. It's really gives us the ability to not only travel and experience other cultures, but also just see what everyone else is doing. As we go along, I always try to have fun along the way. This is Wien. Coming back for a tour, I've never seen Wien, but people were pretty intense about them. This was on a visit over to Atlanta. I heard that they had a fish tank that could hold a whale shark, and so I had to go see that action. Getting to see, I didn't get a chance to really get into their pumping system very much, but yeah, they had some of the largest pumps I'd ever seen in my life at that facility. This is the Ice Hotel up in Kiruna, Sweden at the Cold Climate Design Conference. And not a lot of people know, but if you sketch out a design for one of the rooms, whether it's on a napkin or the wrapper that's holding your sandwich, and they like it, they'll pair you with an ice carver and ship you off to Kiruna so that you can make your idea reality. Again, traveling all around the world has really allowed us to not only see other cultures, but also see how other people do things and meet a lot of great people in our industry. Those are contractors up in Fairbanks. This is traveling up there on the upper left-hand corner. That's the Fairbanks Mechanical Contractors Association meeting, which I was just at. They have a Christmas meeting, and me and one of the wholesalers cook up a prime rib and do some Ecuadorian shrimp. Some other characters over there, Pete Rounds from Last Frontier, again, just doing factory visits. It also allows us, when we do factory visits, this is our team from Alaska as well as a team from Hawaii who was there learning about VRF, and again, just immersed in their culture. And they were so happy to host us. And living in Alaska gives us a lot of opportunities because everyone is so curious. And also, I'm spending time over at the local 367. These are some of the apprentices there. And we do not only piping, near boiler piping and things like that, but we also do some time on professional and personal. And that being said, this is a moment just to kind of shake off the day, unclench your jaw, relax your shoulders, and just realize how much tension we hold in our bodies. So for me, a lot of times when we're interacting with one another on a work basis, we have this image, and that image is of you as an adult. We don't forget that all of us have our own origin stories. And for myself, I grew up initially in a foster home in East LA, and then we moved from East LA to Manly Hot Springs, Alaska. And it was a bit of a culture shock. I thought we were at a campsite again. As we traveled through Canada, I didn't realize this would be our new home. I did go through a long hair phase, as you can see there. Heavy metal and Metallica and rock and roll was my lifestyle for a long time. And, you know, we forget that everyone starts out somewhere. And with that, you bring a lot of coping skills and tactics that you utilize to make it through life. What we're going to discuss is how do you maintain a sustainable lifestyle during a chaotic period in your life, whether it's COVID world or a challenging project or switching careers or whatever may be happening. But there's a lot of misconceptions. Just like boxing, which is something that not a lot of you know I used to do, before you even get in the ring, it starts here. And that's that picture over on the left-hand side. That was me. I was maybe even a little heavier than that when I started out. And when it goes to looking at boxing, you have to have a pregame plan, and this is not the plan to get you into the ring. A lot of times when it comes to whether we're challenged at work with challenging conflict or at home or whatever, we think we're just going to go into it with the skill set we have from the couch back into real life. When it comes to boxing, just to be a beginner, this is what the workout looks like. And it's ridiculous. But in life, when it comes to tackling our life situations, there's no regimen, there's no skill set of things that we are put through to kind of give us the ability to be here. We all want to be at the point where we're winning, where we feel like we're doing good, where we have self-respect and we feel like we're doing well in life. But long before you get in the ring, there's lots of conditioning, and there's lots. You don't even put gloves on and punch anyone before you spend a lot of time on a heavy bag, a crazy bag, working on your cardio. And when it comes to conditioning, if you look at when you have a conflict resolution or you're working through a challenging situation, if we do conditioning for all sports, why is it that we don't do any sort of conditioning for our lives, where we take a look at what's going on with our system? And I've tried to look at it like a PID loop, is how are you tightening that? Or maybe your specifications for your life. When was the last time you revised those? So conditioning, by definition, is a process in which stimuli is created by an exercise program performed by athletes to produce higher level of functions. Well, how does that pertain to us? When it comes to conditioning, and this is where the rubber meets the road, is most of it is going to be a mental game. Here are when you're talking about boxing, here's what boxing psychology is driving into the boxer. Emotional control, anxiety control, coping, preparation, self-belief, and that's just to get into the ring. This should be the same set of skills that we're preparing our own selves for when we're walking into our own lives. Again, with the anxiety control, coping, these are things that you're having to navigate while you're in the ring, and yet when we get pushed into challenging situations, we kind of think we're just going to wing it or utilize the skill set we used growing up in our family or wherever we've acquired skills, jobs as teenagers. And when it comes to emotional control, like Mike Tyson famously said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And that may come in the form of somebody calling you and the contractor's like, I want to see you down here at the job site right now. You're like, oh God, what's happening? So when it comes to emotional control, it really, really starts at your inner dialogue. And that's going to be the primary focus. I don't know if any of you watch Portlandia, but I think Fred Armisen has a good quote there. So when it comes to inner dialogue, we got to remember that your brain is an organ. And like all of your organs in your body, when you're at rest, what are your organs doing? They're looking to work as efficiently as possible, right? Conserve energy. And if you've made it efficient to think bad thoughts about yourself and you're exhausted and you're run down, you've been working 14-hour days, where's your mind going to go? You're literally making those neural synapses basically micro highways. And if you've made it efficient to think about yourself like that, what's going to happen? And as Lydia says, don't believe everything you tell yourself. And another famous author, Anais Nin, this is critical to understand, is we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are, meaning that when you walk into a situation, especially if someone's called you, I want the engineer down here right now, immediately what goes up the wall? Okay, what's going on? Where are we going? And the stories that you start to tell yourself really dictates on who shows up at this situation. And so, like anyone, hopefully you don't have a challenging situation like this photograph displays, but in your career as an engineer, you're going to have some challenging situations, or you may even make a mistake. And if you really want to audit and see what your self-talk is like, see what happens when you make a mistake and just pause and just kind of try and step back mentally and just see what your self-talk looks like. For me, what I found was I started hearing words from crappy bosses I had in the past. Why'd you do this? You know, all of these things that I was resurrecting and bringing forward into the present and hearing them over and over and over again. And that was shocking and unsettling for me. And so as a consequence, started looking at what happens when I get triggered and why am I getting triggered? A lot of times, if someone were to walk in the room and accuse each one of us of making some structural issue, and we'd be like, hey, that's not our problem. We're not even triggered. It doesn't even do anything to us. But in the structural department, it would light those guys up, right? And so why are we getting triggered? What is going on in us? And so Dr. Shafali does a lot of talk about this. She is a therapist, and inner dialogue is a route. And what ends up happening is you get triggered, and the first thing that happens is you start a story. You're running late. You walk outside, it's raining. What do you say? Oh God, of course it's raining. This always happens to me. You start this story, and this story has been built on and utilized, and it's like a really thick groove in a record. The needle's not going to go out of this. The second thing is you got to make a judgment. This is not good. This is bad. Again, the rain, traffic, all of these things are very neutral energy things, but in our minds, we're building up this story. And what's terrible to me about this is A, it's happening in nanoseconds, and B, a lot of times we never get to win in our story. And to me, that's not a good situation. So that's why this is really, really critical to our well-being, whether it's at work or at home. You continue to, run late. This always happens to me. Your dialogue, great. Now on top of this, it's running. And again, as you start building this story, and eventually it starts working into your outside world. So if an athlete were to approach their match with that type of mentality, oh my goodness, he's going to do this. This is going to happen. She's going to uppercut me. She's good at submissions. Oh my God, I'm not good. What would be the result in the ring? Why is it that they teach boxers and anyone who stood on a podium to get a gold medal? What do they say? I saw myself getting my hand raised at the end of the match. I saw myself crossing the match. I saw myself summiting. I saw myself always seeing themselves. And then when we're in a tight spot, what do we see? Oh no, I got to go down to the job site. What does the contractor want now? This job has been a real challenge. I don't know what's going on. I can't really figure it out. What am I going to do? Here comes a spiral, and all we do is hit play, and we don't realize that just like your specifications, that dialogue can and should be updated to a dialogue that serves and supports you. And that even goes even further, which we're going to get into here in a moment. So entering in any situation with this disaster thinking is like a boxer getting into the ring with some acute injuries. And that's going to net a different result for most. It doesn't mean that it's impossible. This has been seen time and time again when you look at boxers like Robert Whitaker. He broke his hand in the first round and finished it. And you have Julia. She broke her hand and fought and won. But who are these people? She didn't just get off the couch, get into the ring, break her hand, and finish this round. This is after years and years and years of practice and visualization and conditioning. And so it can be done, but it isn't going to just happen magically. And so this is a big spoiler alert. Nobody's coming to rescue you. And I think our society promotes a lot of that. If I just had the right person, if I just was in love with the right person, if I just had the right job, if there's something was different about me, or if my past was different about me, then I would be different. A lot of times we're asking ourselves, what now, instead of what is in my now? Where are things at? Let me just take an assessment of where things are. So the key is the answer lies within ourselves. If we can't find peace and happiness there, it's just not going to come from outside. And that is something that I think is would be detrimental to capitalism in and of itself. I think all of us as men and women and people on the planet, we're all marketed to because why? Because we need to have that truck to be cool. We need to have that outfit. We need to have those pants, those shoes, that, outfit, whatever it is, in order to be okay. So when it comes to our inner dialogue, the predictable path is gear one, lack and scarcity, and then the story begins. We hit play. Second gear, more lack, more details added to the story. Then comes the tough stuff. Gear three, shame, anger, judgment. Then time to point fingers. Either we point fingers outside aggressively, this is their fault, this is that person's issue, or we point them inwardly. If my past was different, I wish this never would have happened. And they both net different things. Then we start spiraling, then patterns, and then lastly, acting out anger, depression, addiction, and anxiety. A lot of problems arise in the fact that when you're young, this sort of lifestyle is really sustainable. But it does catch up to you, and that part is non-negotiable. So when we're developing the story by ourselves, where we don't get to win, when we're always looking at the disaster preparation, what is that doing to our gas tank before we even get into a situation? That's a quick drain on it. That's like bleeding fuel out of the airplane wings in order to make sure there's not a bigger disaster when you land. So what does lack really look like on more of a societal scale? And this is Dr. Shafali. She does a lot of counseling, and she says that this is standard protocol for almost everybody that she does counseling with. And the fact that that is so prevalent is the reason we wanted to take a look at this, to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, that instead of going into lack, we can stop and pause for a moment and say, what would I love to happen? Yeah, and that's something that I do on a lot of job sites. When I go into a job site and everyone has just gotten so microscopic off something, before I even get in the door, I think, okay, best case scenario, it's something really straightforward and simple that somebody just missed. And I walked into AWWU and they're just really frustrated with the equipment. And I said to the maintenance guy, what do you do to get the boilers to run again? Well, I don't know what's going on with these darn things, but when I hit this, they start again. Well, guess what? It was a flow switch. The flow switch was just starting to touch the back end of the pipe, and it just needed to be adjusted. Simple, but everyone was just like pushing buttons on the boilers and trying to figure out what was going on. That was a huge relief. What I could have done, though, before I got there, oh my gosh, it's AWW. They're a huge customer of ours. They really like our equipment. And that's going to bring a certain energy to the whole situation. So how do we stop this pattern? And it really comes to just being mindful, watching your mind. And that means learning how to be a safe place to grow and change, because growth is going to be a lot of failures, and failures are just simply opportunities to learn. The problem is depending on the stories you tell yourself, when there is a failure, it might reaffirm or confirm, I'm bad, I'm not the best student, I should have got better grades. All of a sudden the story starts, and that's where becoming a safe place to grow becomes critical. So focusing on the relationship that you have with yourself is primary to this experience, because it does affect every relationship that you have with everyone else. And that really comes to, how do you receive support? A lot of us, and I'm speaking from a male perspective because that's the life I've led, is we don't know how. What do we do when things get messy? We silo, we isolate, we don't see our friends, and then all of a sudden they're like, well, I haven't seen you in a while. Oh yeah, I was going through some stuff. Like, we don't even know how to receive some support from our friends or from each other. And so that has to start with ourselves. Pausing, stopping, breathing, giving yourself another story to tell yourself, another dialogue. Socrates, know thyself. I don't know if any of you guys know any of these individuals, but this was in Seoul, Korea as well.
Is the guy on the left there? I went to school with him.
Oh, right on.
We were in the same Colorado State class.
From RSA.
Yeah.
So knowing yourself means really simple things. What's your favorite thing about yourself? How do you recharge? And by recharge, I don't mean numbing out, like we saw in the pre-gaming picture. How do you recharge? What brings you more energy? What are the relationships in your life that bring you more energy? What are the relationships in your life that drain you? What are your best traits? How do you receive support, which we just talked about? How do you receive feedback? How do you receive love? And I like what Lisa Nichols says, especially when it comes to love and relationships, make sure it's an open book test. When you hear yourself saying, they should have known, they should have known it was my birthday, they should have known it, they shouldn't have told me this on this day because of what was going on. We need to let people know where we're at, so then they have an opportunity to respond with kindness, with compassion, with like, oh, I didn't know, I had no clue. And you may find out they've been through it too. You might find an ally by being boldly vulnerable. So if I'm not good to myself, how can I expect anyone else to be good to me? By the very famous Maya Angelou. And that part is very, very important. This is an individual that I got to do photos with from a band called the Avery Wolves up in Fairbanks. They sometimes play at the Baumspiel at the curling club. And he just said, I'd really love to get a rock and roll picture. Like, this would be my dream come true. I was like, let's just do it. So this is that picture. This is where he sees the moment. He was brave. We were doing all kinds of other stuff. And he's like, hey, I'd really, really love it if we could do this. And so we made it happen. But if you're still waiting for your parents to be proud of you, and you're still waiting to be happy, or you're still waiting for your boss to acknowledge you, and you're wishing your significant other would recognize your efforts, that problem, those outside problems, those stem from the inside you, not acknowledging your own self, not seeing your own traits, not valuing yourself. And so you're used to it. You know who you are. You know your ins and outs. You know your traits, your downfalls, your shortcomings. And so then all of a sudden we start to believe, well, this is just how life is for me. This is just how things go for me. Maybe I just need to toughen up. Maybe I just need to grow up. You know, how many of us have heard that? Unfortunately, in that arena, this is where many of us discover that being who we are is not safe. And so mostly in childhood, we became the smart kid or the bad kid or the fat kid or the funny kid or the kid that was always at the dock. And we start picking up these personas, and those things kind of follow us through life. And we don't take time to pause and just see really what it is we do value, not only about ourselves, but about our lives. What kind of life do we want to live? Growing up in Manly Hot Springs, where I grew up, a town of 80 people, I never thought I was going to go to a concert and see Iron Maiden. Like, that was one of my dreams forever, for as long as I could think. Well, not last year, because it was COVID world, but the year before, I got to go see Iron Maiden. And at this point in my career, I was able to get myself the good tickets, and they played for 2 hours. And it was great. It was amazing. But allowing yourself to dream means taking check on that inner dialogue, because what does that inner dialogue do? No, that'll never happen. No, that's not for me. Or worst case, you start hearing words from other people. So the first exercise we're going to do is looking at yourself with compassion. And that means stop looking at your 2001 self with your 2021 eyes. Remember, when you were back then in 2001, you were doing the best you could. And if you would have known better, you would have done better. And so just allowing that experience to be there as a learning experience, and not having to go back and just be like, oh, I should have went to college earlier. Or, oh, I should have this, I should have that. Quit beating up on yourself. And forgiveness is the exercise that you practice to increase compassion and empathy for yourself. And as Jack Kornfield says, forgiveness means giving up all hope for a better past. There's a lot of power in that, accepting what is. Why forgiveness? Because a lot of us carry around emotional baggage, and it is just as useful as these items of luggage. They're heavy and cumbersome, and we get used to it, but they really don't bring any benefits to us long term. And also, when you forgive, it doesn't change the past, but it sure does change the future. And Mahatma Gandhi said it right. This isn't anything that is something I take lightly. The one thing I think a lot of people do not discuss when it comes to dealing with these things is the amount of courage it takes to start stepping towards this stuff. It's not a wheelbarrow full. It's not a couple 55-gallon drums. It's a couple of big, huge dump trucks. And that's really where it comes down to getting to know ourselves. I don't know if any of you know who Dave Asprey is. He's really next level as far as life hacking goes. And you can go to this retreat. It's 5 days. It's called 40 Years of Zen. And it's $15,000. And what they're doing in these pods is connecting your brain to some feed out readings, and they're going to try to replicate the brain waves of Zen masters who have been meditating for 40 plus years so that you can reap the benefits of it. In the beginning stages of this, they were really struggling to get it to really take. But one of the ladies in the class, they were seeing these high spikes in alpha waves, and they're like, okay, what's going on? She was really receiving a lot of the benefits from it. So they pulled her aside and said, hey, can you kind of tell us what you're doing while you're going through this meditative process? And she said, I just couldn't stop thinking about my ex and how just terrible it was. And it just was, I couldn't think about anything else. Every time I pause, I just have so much anger. So I just started forgiving him and forgiving him and forgiving him. And then my mom, and then my parents, and then, you know, on and on and on. And each time she'd have this cathartic experience through forgiveness, her alpha waves would spike. So it's a measurable mark. So in this 5-day retreat for $15,000, the bulk of what you're going to be doing is going through forgiveness. And it's easy, and this isn't going to sound right to you. It's easy when it's outwardly based, when it's, I need to forgive this contractor, or this engineer, or this person, or this, you know, kid from grade school for bullying me. That part is cathartic, and that really does have a lot of benefits. But where the real courage comes in is forgiving yourself for maybe the son you never were, or the dad you weren't, or the husband you may have never been, or like a friend of mine, he chose to be a chef. He cooks here in the States and down lower 48. But his dad, when he talks about him, he's like, oh yeah, my son in America, he's doing good. He doesn't say what his son does. You know why? Because he's not an engineer, and he's not a doctor, and he's not a lawyer. His dad's embarrassed of him. This guy carries this around all the time, but he loves what he does. He loves what he does. But his dad will not acknowledge it, want to address it. He's like, he's doing all right. And that's terrible. And this guy's living with that. And that, again, this is where forgiveness comes in, from emancipating ourselves from that identity, from those chains. And reality is, it's putting the oxygen mask on yourself first. The other thing is we don't want to wait till it's a disaster before we start doing self-care and start looking at ourselves. And a key, very key thing, if you're feeling resentment, that is you need some pause to do some self-care, and you need to enact some boundaries. Resentment is the thing that shows up in your body that says, my boundaries are messy or undefined or maybe don't exist at all, and that anger is building up, and it has nothing to do with anyone else. That is your stuff. And that's your opportunity to pause and say, okay, I either need to share some boundaries or institute some boundaries. So the second exercise would be self-care. This guy was born without the use of his legs, and when he says, when life gives you a wheelchair, go find a skate park. And Ariana Huffington, she's put together a Huffington Post, hopefully some of you have heard about it. Her attitude is live life as though everything's rigged in your favor. In order to do that, the stories have to stop. A new dialogue has to happen between your ears. Tom Bilyeu, I don't know if you've touched base or seen any of his work on impact theory. He really, really lays into it as far as take selfish time. Make sure your body's getting what it needs. Eat well. Do the hard things in service. And he's really big about doing the stuff that matters to you, that brings you joy. If it's knitting, knit. If it's building Gundam robots, do that. If it's playing video games, it doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that you're honest with yourself and you make time to do it. In a book called The Artist's Way, which is about helping people get creatively unstuck, or in Writer's Block, 2 exercises. One of them is just writing 3 pages longhand, and that's just to help you find clarity. And it doesn't matter what you write about, but for me anyway, by the second and a half or third page, guess what? Clarity happens. The other thing is making artist days. And what that means is if you play guitar, or if you're into painting, you make time for yourself to go down to Guitar Center and just plink around the guitars. 30 minutes, hour, 2 hours, whatever. You don't have to buy anything, but you're making time to feed you. What is that doing? That's getting used to you receiving. That's getting used to you taking care of yourself. That's making it normal. So then when anyone else in your life isn't doing that, you're like, that relationship I need to maybe let go and not invest as much time into. So thriving by finding what gets you ecstatic is one of the things that I immensely enjoy. For me, photography is one of my joys that I take time to do, and it came from when I was growing up. One of the guys that I worked with, that I grew up around, I would go over to his place when I needed to kind of figure out what was going on in my life and just help him do chores. And he would do black and white photography, so we developed things, and I just found a love in it. And I enjoy hearing people say, oh my gosh, I can't wait to show this person this picture, or I can't wait to show them what, how good this looks. I also like flower photography, macro photography, and of course concert photography. That's a polyphonic spree. And again, this is the Avery Wolves at the back of Chilkoot Charlie's, and they're messing around with this box, and this is one of the photos that I wanted to do. And again, when I'm just out in nature, I make sure weekly to make sure I'm out in nature, I get time in the woods, and I usually take my dogs. That's my newest dog, Juniper, chilling out in a tree. And again, I make time for concerts. Seeing Pearl Jam was a dream come true for me. And one of the other things that I really, really have tried to do with myself, and I recommend it for anyone else, is when it comes to your dreams, have as open a mind as you can. This photograph right here with Eddie Vedder was done from a friend of mine, Alicia, who called and said, hey, I know you've always wanted to see Pearl Jam. I have a ticket for you to get down here. So in 54 hours, I finished work late, I went home, packed a bag, got on a plane, flew down, waited in line, got to the front, and saw Pearl Jam, and then flew back to Anchorage. And I was exhausted at the end, but it was so worth it. And I wasn't expecting that at all. Totally out of the blue. And again, where does that dialogue come in? Oh, now I'm going to have more work. If I don't get this one done, this is going to happen. I could have totally talked myself out of it. It was short notice, but I didn't. And I'm so much better for it. Also, in exploring my photography love, I've tried street photography, and I'm not totally on board with it. It is a more messy experience than I was really prepared for. The top picture is in Korea. That gentleman was there for the entire day in that position. You do not see very many. I think we only saw this one individual begging, and people would not look at him. They would just politely set down some money in his hands and walk on by. It was, for him to do that was a humongous monumental situation. And then on the side here, this is Portland, and obviously this person has mobility issues, but there they are with their tent on the sidewalk in downtown Portland. So the human connection for me was really tough. And also I'm a dad, and this is something that I really, really am grateful that I did. Whenever things would happen, I would try and write it down on a piece of a notepad anywhere. And I would stick them in random books. And so then when I'm flipping through looking for something else, I would find them. And I found this one a couple of years ago, My Middle Child Sable. And it just brought me so much joy. I was like, oh man, I totally remembered that day. I remember it was a big deal. I was about to go out the door, and she just made me feel like $1 million. So if you're a parent, or if you're having pinnacle experiences in your life, take time to record the moment just to really capture that, because you may need it one day. So going on the home stretch, being happy and maintaining your happiness does take practice. And I don't know if a lot of you are familiar with shadow boxing, but again, before you even get in the ring, you're doing a lot of shadow boxing. A couple of things are happening there. You're looking at your form, you're looking at your punches, but the big thing that's happening, you're winning your fight. You're thinking about the fight. You're thinking about how you're going to do well, how you're going to use the uppercut, how you're going to use the jab. All of those things happen. And here's just the benefits that boxers are getting from simply just shadow boxing. And so much of it is just in the head. So that mirror work, that's, again, where the rubber meets the road. And when you're looking at yourself, when it comes to forgiveness, when it comes to figuring out what you like, it's a lot harder to do than you might imagine. So Curtis up here says, if you're not talking yourself out of depression, you're talking yourself into depression. And Marissa Peer, who does a lot of work around this, she says a major cause of depression are the harsh, hurtful, critical words that you say to yourself over and over and over again. So how does that work? There's a couple of different things, but this is a practice that I learned from Lisa Nichols, and it is immensely hard to do. And what she says is stand in front of a mirror, you state your name, and you say, Glenn, I am proud of you that. And you say 7 different things that you are proud of yourself for. Next, you say your name, Glenn, I forgive you for, and you say 7 different things. And then lastly, you say your name, and I commit to you that. So And then also what I do is I try to journal things that maybe come up during these experiences, and I'll share that here in a second. But this practice may trigger a lot of emotion and a lot of stuff that you maybe didn't realize was kind of hiding under there. So be gentle with yourself. So when you're standing in front of the mirror, when I say I'm proud of myself, one of the ones was stocking up wood when I was a kid. You know, I was told, you're the man of the house now. You're going to have to make sure the woodshed's full. You're going to have to make sure all this is done. And I saw a picture of myself with hand-me-down jeans that were covered in chainsaw oil and sawdust with a chainsaw. And there was I would never let my kids do this, but it was what had to be done. And I didn't really realize that that is something that I just needed to have acknowledged. You know, sure, it was expected of me and you just step up to the task, but it was something I just really needed to hear, that, you know, I showed up for my family that way. I'm proud of you for teaching yourself how to game the system as a kid. One of the things about growing up in a small town is you want to get out with the 80 people that you've grown up around. So I found out that through the school district, if you have good grades, you could get into student government. And what student government meant, a couple of trips to Fairbanks and some trips to several villages. And that was just epic to me. To get to see other kids and have other experiences was amazing. And again, I was really proud of myself for doing that for myself, getting out and being brave in that way. I'm proud of you, Glenn. I'm proud of you for prioritizing your dreams and making them happen. Like I shared about Iron Maiden, that was a big one for me, getting to make that happen. So, also preparing yourself, I forgive you. For me, I forgive myself for gaining over 70 pounds. I was a lot heavier than I am now. Right now, I still have that approachable, huggable look that not everyone can see on the screen. But it was something I really need to address. And you could utilize this for things that you're going to take to the grave. And that's really, really where it's super important, because we don't realize how carrying stuff around really does affect us. You may have things that you regret. You may be I forgive you for the things you didn't do, for not going to college sooner, not doing this sooner, all these things that we hold against ourselves. And whenever we get hit or triggered, boom, that story pops up again. Let's just take the power out of that narrative by utilizing forgiveness to say, hey, I forgive you for getting and staying in unhealthy relationships. Some of the other examples that Leisha shared, for being so lonely that you lowered your bar for who deserves you. I forgive you for staying when you knew it was time to leave. I forgive you for saying yes when you should have said no. All of that stuff just really hangs in there. And then finally, and to me, I think this is the best part, is I commit to you. And a lot of these things are going to take several times. They just didn't show up out of the blue. And some of the examples are, I'll be your biggest cheerleader. I commit to you that I'll make sure you be around people that inspire you to be a better person. Because proximity really is a thing when it comes to personal growth. You really are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. That's just kind of how things go. And then I commit to you to make time to go on more adventures, which is always a huge benefit. And in doing this, take some time to journal. For me, I do use the artist way, just writing 3 longhand pages, not every time, just when I need it. Not every day, not even every week, but just when I'm really feeling messy or things are feeling overwhelming, I just got to get that stuff out. And what I call it is soul vomit. I just need to puke a little bit, get my bearings again, and then move forward. And again, this stuff may bring up a lot of things for you, but the reason this is so important is that in order for you to receive and experience the life you want to have, it has to start between your ears. It has to start with how you treat yourself. So this practice is something that I've utilized a lot, and where it really comes in is it helps healing those tender wounds where when you are triggered, that's what someone's doing. They're just hitting an old wound from someone else. And it's bringing up all those emotions again. It's giving you that indigestion in your life that you just doesn't feel good. It isn't something that you want to experience all the time. And that forgiveness practice and knowing how to like who you are, that takes all the power away from that. That is how you're empowering yourself so you can enjoy your life. And From Mike Muir, lead singer of Suicidal Tendencies, you can't bring me down. When it comes down to it, it's really us who dictates our experience on the planet, and it all happens through that inner dialogue. And so my exhortation to everyone here and everyone listening is, let's take some time to look at your respect for yourself, for how you talk to yourself, for how you deal with yourself, for who you allow yourself to be around. Maybe do some revisions. Maybe get around some people who have a life or have an experience or have a lifestyle that you want to have more of, and just let them redline some of your life notes, some of your experiences, some of your inner dialogue. Allow yourself to be around people who challenge you to be better and to be who you want to be in life. And also, don't forget that your future self is watching you right now through your memories. I utilize that to motivate myself. That's in Korea. That was some art in the subway. And also, you just never know who you're going to impact. This is Stanley Deo. He's from Manly. This is his old baking pan, and this is sitting in his grave. And it was made by Joe Reddington Jr. Stanley was the unofficial mayor of Manly for a long time. He was an Irish immigrant, and he was just a good guy. And just him being who he was has really had a huge impact on Joe Reddington Jr., and he made this for him, and it sits on his grave to this day. And the one thing that I encourage, especially right now, when you are around the people that really matter to you, take time to be boldly vulnerable. That's kind of the way I test a lot of relationships, is maybe I'll share a little bit more, like, man, I'm really struggling. COVID world has me up against the ropes, or, you know, whatever it's going, just like a little line. It's like fishing. You just toss out the lure and just see what happens. Occasionally people are like, no. Change the subject or leave. Like, it's like, most of the time though, it's, I'd say 90% of the time I get a good response back. Because especially as men, when we're in the trenches and we want to silo and want to just like deal with our problems, this takes a lot of courage to reach out and say, man, I'm struggling. I'm having a tough time. Today, 1,440 men are going to commit suicide. That's real. That's because of this. That's grave news in my mind. And so the bold vulnerability is a way we find other allies in life. And you just don't know what other people have been through. And opening up allows you to kind of see their wounds, and it allows them to be seen, and allowing, that's all what we all want, right? You want to be seen, you want to be heard, you want to be understood. And if you can't do that for yourself, no one else can do it for you. I have a friend who's in a relationship right now, and he is the nicest guy ever in the whole wide world. But at any time he even goes anywhere near, like, he got a little frustrated. His partner was, you're just like all the other guys. You're just like all the other guys. He isn't, though. But why is she saying that? That's her experience. Like Anais Nin says, we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. And so he's just pinned down in the situation. And by allowing yourself to peel back the layers, do forgiveness, work through this stuff, suddenly the images clean up a lot. And you realize you don't have to navigate and jump on and respond to everything that pops out of someone else's mouth. Because most of the time they're not thinking about you. They're thinking about their own stuff, right? So thanks again for the time. And again, this is my dog, Justice, doing what matters to him. This is his favorite thing to do. We have to stop, and everyone lays down, and then he does this little thing. But spend time with yourself. Make sure you take time to put a smile on your own face. And as time goes on, maybe I'll get invited back and we can go into this a little bit more deeper and talk about boundaries. But thank you very much, and that's the end. Stop recording.